Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm delighted to have you all here with us today. Today, I am joined by my two colleagues, and we are going to be discussing our 2024 process automation predictions. Now, just before we get started, I'd like to cover some quick housekeeping items. So your lines are muted for the duration of this webinar. If you have any issues, I recommend that you reach out to info@flowforma.com for assistance. Also, at the end of this webinar, we will have a short survey where you can fill in your feedback. We would greatly appreciate it. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use our Q&A function. We will have a couple of minutes at the end where we can take some of your questions, and any pressing ones, we'll try and incorporate them into our conversations throughout as well. So now, as I mentioned, I am delighted to be joined by my two colleagues from FlowForma today. Welcome, Jared and Paul. So firstly, I'm joined by Jared Newman. Jared is CTO of FlowForma. He has over 20 years of experience designing and delivering process automation solutions that have allowed businesses to integrate and automate their operations. Jared is heavily focused. Hi, Jared. Jared is heavily focused on ideating new concepts for our products roadmap, and he also helps businesses make the complex simple. And then we also have Paul Stone. Welcome, Paul. How are you today? Paul has quite a broad experience in the IT industry. He uses his in-depth product knowledge and his domain knowledge to support our clients and our internal teams. In his role as product evangelist and strategist, Paul also proposes, manages, and communicates the product roadmap. So as you can tell, we have two experts on the line today who are going to share their insights and their thoughts on what is to be process automation for 2024. So I hope you're all excited as I am. But before we get into our 2024 predictions, I think it makes a lot of sense to look back on what we discussed in 2023. So we like to do these webinars each January to set the scene for the year and help organizations plan out their roadmap for a successful year of digitizing. So Paul, I will hand over to you to share, our top 4 predictions of 2023.
Yeah, thanks, Ursula. It was very interesting when we look back at our last year's projections just to see where we right, and pleased to say that in most cases we were indeed. So the very first one that we looked at was the current economic climate back at the beginning of 2023, and we saw that people would shift their focus on their transformation projects to focus more on business continuity and resilience. And indeed, that's what we've seen. We found that companies in 23 were more conservative. They basically wanted to, if they were going to change, they wanted to justify that change. They wanted to associate that change with better time management, with better resource utilization, with better cost control. We also saw an increase of interest in risk management. So we've seen people request risk management solutions for risks across their business. So not just in one specific area, it was general operational risk. And that's something that we saw an increased demand for. So I think for sure we saw an increased interest in ensuring business continuity and also making their companies more resilient to external change. The next prediction was related to C-level and seeing C-level as the primary driver for automation strategy, with most of the development work being carried out by the business people. Again, I'd say this was absolutely the case. And we saw that basically from a strategy perspective, definitely increased automation was seen as something that would drive the business towards achieving their business goals. And we also saw people also looking to automate processes themselves. So rather than being dependent on external providers and internal suppliers, they look to digitize things themselves. The third prediction was process automation technology would replace paper-based tasks and support challenges around skills and labor. And I think definitely this was the case. I mean, post-pandemic, paper is much less relied upon in industry in general, and that people will see process automation as a way to remove that paper and improve their operations and deal with this skilled labor shortage. Because one thing we did see, which might be surprising, is that there were many companies with big order books, lots of business going on, and we're seeing a real challenge in actually supplying the labor to support that business expansion. So process automation was seen as a solution to that. And
And tell
finally,
me
our
this,
fourth.
Paul, from your point of view, the sea level thing. I mean, we saw an awful lot of that. I mean, particularly in some of the events we ran, I'd say we saw a lot more sea levels turning up, which means the sort of whole process automation agenda has shifted up a few notches and is owned now at a much more senior level within the organisation. So we were happy to see that.
Definitely more interest from sea level, yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Really seeing automation as a strategic imperative to drive efficiency and also to deal with the problems they're having in terms of resilience and, as we were saying, labor shortages. Absolutely. Um, and on to our fourth prediction, which was most firms currently have a plan for a citizen development strategy within the next 12 months. Now, this prediction was made at the start of 2023. On this, um, on this particular prediction, I think we were off slightly. In terms of having a citizen development strategy, the strategy is often more towards automation, and the citizen development initiative is actually being driven by the business people themselves, looking to actually fulfill their automation strategy using business developer tools. Okay, so I would say that at the C level, a business development citizen development strategy is not maybe being developed, but it is being applied at a lower level in the organization as people find methods to meet and achieve those business goals. Also, as well, citizen development is a very broad brush. So it relates to lots of different things. It can relate to things that are used for personal productivity, which doesn't really, it's not really a strategic directive. So that may be a little bit of confusion as well, where you're looking for strategic changes that where automation can bring advantage versus personal productivity tools, which really are not really a strategic decision.
Yeah, I suppose that one was one of the more disappointing areas, and it's not like we're not getting interest in the whole citizen developer area. It's just sort of level of strategy that we expected to see developed throughout 2023 didn't quite emerge.
Absolutely, I definitely reflect that, Jared, in terms of the level of interest. It's very
Mm,
high. It's just coming
mm,
from a lower level, I guess, in the organization.
yeah,
Great to look back on last year and get your thoughts, and let's see how that has influenced 2024. Um, but what we would like to do before we jump into our 2024 predictions is just have a quick poll. So we'd like to ask you as the audience, what are your top drivers for process automation or optimization in your organization for 2024? So I will launch a quick poll, and you'll have 5 different options here. This is multiple choice, so please select as many as you see fit. So is it cost reduction? Possibly it's improved worker productivity, top level business strategy, improving customer experiences, or maybe it's issues around labor shortage that is driving your organization to look at optimizing or automating your processes this year. So what I'll do is I'll leave that up for just a couple more seconds. So if you'd like to get your last minute votes in, I can see lots coming in here now. It's changing slightly. Okay, I'll just give it 3 more seconds. So 3, 2, 1. Great. Okay, so now you should be able to see the results. So, oh, it's quite a mixed bag, I have to say. Paul and Jared, are you surprised or any thoughts?
yeah. I have to say, well, I'm not surprised at the improved worker productivity and the improving customer experiences. They are very topical at the moment, and when you look at lots of different surveys out there, particularly around the process automation space, and those two pop up in the top three or four all the time. So I mean that's a common goal that people have. Cost reduction, current economic environment as well is always on people's minds. So that definitely is relevant and something that process automation can help with quite a bit.
Yeah, I definitely concur with that. I think the one that dragged behind was labor shortage, and indeed,
Yeah.
labor shortages are dependent on the industry. And this particular webinar, of course, is open to all industries, so that may be something related to that. But it's very interesting to see such an even response on all the other four categories.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Definitely. Great. Thank you for taking part. And we have a couple of polls along the way to keep it interactive. Great. So now, Jared, I will pass over to you to chat about our first prediction for 2024.
Sure, yeah. So look, the first one really is very much focused around generative AI, and obviously that it will reshape our lives. I think that we couldn't possibly have a predictions webinar without talking about AI, given the current environment. And obviously there's huge awareness of this, and the phenomenal adoption rate of OpenAI's ChatGPT really has catapulted the whole generative AI agenda to the top of everybody's mind. And then considering it was only launched in November 22, it really has gained a huge amount of traction in a short space of time. So we see all around us really companies adopting generative AI at this stage and building it in mainly into their employee and customer facing processes, which ties in a lot to that poll because what people are using for is around productivity and also improving customer experiences. And I think it hasn't all been plain sailing. There's obviously been issues people have discovered there, but they're just challenges that people have to overcome or organizations have to overcome. And when we look at it then, organizations are very curious about AI. 35% say they plan to deploy it in the next year, so in 2024. And but the majority of organizations have yet really to kind of take the plunge and get involved in offering products and services with generative AI. And for those that have taken the plunge, I think the areas they're interested in are operations, customer service, and data processing in general. So I think from a 2024 point of view, we're going to be seeing a lot more AI activity. So if we delve into that a little bit more, Forrester recently did a survey where they asked people, well, what do they anticipate that their organization is going to use generative AI for in the next 12 months? So you can see on the slide there that productivity is right up there at the top, unsurprisingly, and knowledge management, software development and design. There's obviously a lot of interest in that area by using generative AI. So I think this gives us a good insight into the areas that people are looking at over the next 12 months. It allows us to zoom in for that from that kind of general statement about generative AI to what people are really thinking about. And I suppose I would say that many organizations, whether they have a strategy or not, are already using generative AI. Well, at least their employees are. And they're using that to boost their own personal productivity. And in many cases, organizations are trying to catch up in terms of establishing strategies and policies to provide the guardrails needed around using that. I mean, the term bring your own AI has already been coined, and it really is a reality today. And I think that's been one of the successful things about generative AI is it nearly reached a consumer audience before it reached an organizational audience. So I think if we look at those use cases, Gartner has a term called everyday AI. So a lot of these use cases really are around everyday AI. And what that really is about is improving your back office productivity and your front office operations to support better service levels and productivity and things like that. So there are barriers to implementing that, but at the same time, generally that's, I think people welcome it at the moment. So we see, just speaking from our own personal experience in FlowForma, we would see that we get quite a bit out of this at the moment. So we would be using a lot of AI tools now in our software development process, and they've given us productivity gains, particularly for mid-level software developers. So it's a kind of positive experience. We also use it in other parts of the company. So we can see that AI is becoming part of the overall fabric of what people use day to day. And then I think the next one, the challenge then is really looking at game changing AI, which is really where you're looking at AI to transform your business model or products and services that you actually offer. So I think throughout 2024, we're going to see more of that game changing AI emerging from companies in the marketplace. So then from our own perspective, when we started looking at the various AI developments and initiatives that were happening out in the industry, what we wanted to do is very much focus in on the people who use our application day in, day out. And, that might be a citizen developer who's actually building out some process automations, or it might be employees who are participating in a process, or the supervisors managing a process. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we offered was relevant and added real value to those end users. So what we built out in 2023 were a number of proof of concepts, and really this is the way we go about doing this. We know the technology's there and it works. The question really is how can it be applied to our specific subject matter? So what we've done is built a number of proof of concepts, and the first one kind of focused in very much on people who are filling in forms and participating in the process. And we really like the concept that people can fill those in many different ways. So perhaps they can complete a form using natural language, or maybe they could do it through speech, or maybe they need to be able to translate that form into their own native language so that they can easily understand it and fill it in. So these kind of multimodal capabilities are something we're really interested in. And I know there's a lot more people interested in those kind of capabilities and building them into their products as well. So I think we're going to see more of that. And then if we look then at one of our objectives is when our customers use FlowForma, we want to see them rolling out, and we want to see process automation being adopted across their business. So the question then is, how do we actually make that happen? So we're trying to make it easier, remove any friction points for people who are trying to build processes and roll them out. So here where we've built out a proof of concept on a whole process building copilot, which has its own knowledge base, which is a knowledge base of standard processes, which we can add to. And what this can do then is you can build out a skeleton process quite easily. And then through natural language kind of chatting with this copilot capability, you can start to add detail to those processes. So they're the kind of areas that we're interested in, and I know other people are looking at too from a process automation perspective.
Okay, so I think we'll move on to prediction number two here, which is basically we see that citizen process innovators will be needed to accelerate optimization in 2024. So there's a difficult balance between the need for change and the ability to execute and change. And one of the things that we feel that's going to happen is that um, citizen process innovators will come in and optimize processes themselves without dependencies on other resources. So the people who know the processes best are able to draft out digital process solutions and able to refine those over time, rather than using the traditional approach of pulling in expensive process expert resources to analyze the process, document it out, and instigate change, which takes a very long time. If you're going to innovate, you need to do that at some speed, and the people who are best able to do that are the people at the coalface, the business people who understand the processes best and can implement change much more quickly, and also do it at scale. So it's not about just implementing the change to solve particular specific business challenges. It's about innovating at scale, trying things out, not being afraid to actually um, try things out and fail fast, so that you can actually draft out a digital process, let's say, make that happen, and if it works, great. You can measure its success or its failure and drop it and try something else. And that's really what innovation is all about, is trying things and failing or succeeding and measuring the impact. So we feel that citizen process innovators are people who are able to make this happen. It's a little bit difficult to do this as a big strategic objective because you have to allocate significant resources typically to do that, and you have to bring in people to help you make the change and so on. Why not do it yourself? Why not have those business people who understand their processes actually drive the change within your business and drive that change by measuring the impact of it? Okay, if we can move on to the next slide. So what this is doing is making process automation everybody's job. And that's quite a statement. It means that the people who are actually responsible for executing the process, well, hey, you know what? It's your process. You own it. Organizations are facing this automation imperative. And the problem is that traditional methods of automating processes and applying digital automation, they're expensive, they're time consuming, and very often, unfortunately, they fail because the change is not enacted at the pace that it needs to be. So the way to solve that is to actually make process automation part of people's jobs. They understand their processes, they're executing the processes every single day. So why not get them to digitize the process and own it and make it more efficient as time goes by in order to meet those automation goals of the business overall? So Forrester see that over 75% of non-specialized employees are expected to work on process automation in their areas. Expected is a big word. So what this means is that organizations are going to expect 75% of their people to actually automate their process and optimize the processes that they're working on. So it's no longer, the organization is no longer expecting to employ experts to actually do this. They're expecting the people themselves to automate the process and optimize those processes. This is a really significant statement. Um, and the way to do this, it has to be done in a controlled manner because these people, they're not process optimization experts. They're people who execute the processes. They understand their business very well, but they're not expert resources. So what you need to do to make that happen is manage the risks that that you're use manage the risk that you're accepting when you are giving them the power to actually automate themselves. So if you're empowering people to digitize, build digital process systems themselves, you have to manage those risks. And you need a system to do that. You need a governance framework um, so that they can be safe and secure in actually building out processes themselves, and you're not going to have any negative impact because of their lack of process optimization expertise. And there's various ways that you can do that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it's interesting to see this Gartner forecast where they see by 2025, which is only next year, that 70% of new applications will be developed by the enterprise will use no code or low code technologies. No code and low code technologies are specifically built for business people to actually build their own systems. So 70% of new applications are foreseen to be built by these types of technologies in the hands of business people, non specialized resources. It's really interesting to see that that's the prediction in 2025, just next year. So what we'll talk about now on our next slide will be um, the way of doing this. So we're going to talk a little bit about our own experience, how citizen development strategies are actually implemented in practice in organizations in 2023 and prior to that. So one of the first things that you do is this approach needs to be championed. You have to find people in the organization who are prepared to stick their hand up and say, yeah, I'll push this forward. So finding a champion is really critical. And champions are evident, fairly evident in the business. I mean, usually a champion is seeing benefits for themselves. So they'll be able to see that by digitizing this process, I am going to gain in some way personally. So champions often see career advancement as so an opportunity for career advancement, because they're going to promote change within the business that's going to have some positive end effect, positive outcome. Um, Champions are often people who are employed in a job that actually requires them to make change. So they might be a business improvement person, for example. So champions, one of the things I would say, however, is that champions usually stand out and they usually stick their hand up. So, in other words, in one sense, they're not. It sounds like I might sound like I'm saying, hey, it's an impossible task to find a champion. Actually, you know what? Champions often find you. There are people
Yeah,
who are basically
they tend to put themselves forward, I think.
that. Yeah, exactly. And they're true innovators. They're the kind of people who want change, who seek change, who actually want to make things better. And
Hmm.
they're actually nowhere near as difficult to find as I might make it sound there. But you know what? Champions are no good if they're not supported. So you have to be able to train people to help themselves. So you have to train your champion for sure, but then you have to train the people that are actually going to actually to start digitizing those processes. So you have to have a training program in place, and a lot of vendors like ourselves will actually support you in that, by giving you training materials and hand holding you through the first few processes, etc., etc. So think about training because you have to have some kind of training mechanism in place for your new innovators. Take a process first approach. Well, what does that mean? There's lots of citizen development tools out there and lots of types of citizen development, like building forms, for example. But you know what? A process first approach is a great way of approaching citizen development. Why? Because processes achieve business goals. And if you can measure your success by the achievement of business goals, it really helps you build momentum in your business for change. So if you can say, well, actually, you know what? I had a business leader here. He is a process expert on our procurement process, and he implemented a digital process which we can measure directly. And here's the stats. And look, it's increased the efficiency of our operations by 80%, or by 20%, or by 50%. Doesn't really matter. The thing is that you can show clear evidence that you know what that process achieved the business goal and it was done faster because we digitized it. And that statement with backing evidence is very powerful in building momentum within your business. So we'd always suggest take a process first approach. Now those digital processes have no value unless they're adopted. So you have to listen to your workforce. Listen to your workforce and the feedback that they give you. And when you deploy that process, if you want to drive adoption, listen to them. Listen to them and make the little changes that make all the difference to them. Make the little changes that just simply show that you're listening to them. It's really important because at the end of the day, a big part with adoption is getting people to have a feeling of ownership. And it's not just the process experts, the people who know their processes. It's the people who execute them day to day in the field. This is really important that you listen to them and adjust that process to make it run as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I think just on that adoption, I mean, from our perspective, obviously we like to see adoption, but then so do most of the champions there and people who are really focused on an automation strategy. It's always one of the challenges is to drive that adoption. And as you say, making any adjustments or changes to processes you've automated into the automation in an iterative way is definitely a way to encourage that. If people feel they're being listened to and that you're taking into account their feedback and you can react to that quickly, then it definitely helps with that adoption, which is everybody's goal, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is like target the obvious. Try and fix an obvious pain point that everybody's aware of. Kind of self-explanatory that one. And demonstrate their ROI. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier on. You need to actually demonstrate a saving that you're making, whether it's 20 or 50 or 80, it doesn't matter, so that you can use that to justify further investment and for further momentum within the business for change. And so that's just a really important thing. Demonstrate that ROI, show your savings to as many people as you can, and that will drive adoption in the business. One little tip we always say is, hey, involve external parties. If you can actually involve external parties in your digitized process, it really shows a higher level of process improvement. So a higher level of savings, better stats, again, to demonstrate our ROI and show that it's really worthwhile to digitize processes at scale. Okay, I've probably taken enough on that particular slide, so I'll move on to this one. In fact, maybe Jared, you might talk a little bit about governance.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I can talk about that. So I think one of the areas when we look at organizations that are automating at scale, one of the typical kind of concern that arises is, well, okay, if I'm using an army of citizen developers within my organization to roll out process automation, then how do I actually govern that? How do I know what's actually going on? Or am I just enabling everybody to effectively automate at will with no control? So, what governance then allows us to do is really manage that kind of widespread automation project so that there is visibility and oversight over what's actually happening on a day to day basis. And specifically, this appeals to IT because in terms of moving from a traditional IT landscape where an internal IT team effectively have a backlog of applications they need to deliver into the business in a very structured manner, you're moving to a position where the business themselves can start to automate processes. So what IT are really interested in is making sure that the controls and that structure that they have in place in application development teams rolls out into the business. So what you're looking for is something that helps manage those citizen developer initiatives, but at the same time allows people get on with what they need to do, and at the same time provides the oversight that people have to ensure that things are being done properly, adhering to standards, and fitting within the overall corporate governance framework. So I think, yeah, I mean, there's lots of different interested parties in that overall governance thing. Maybe Paul, you'd like to have a chat about some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's quite a few interested parties here. You can probably focus in on the three highlighted ones there. You've got your business expert, who's the process person with the process knowledge. So you have to have somebody who actually understands the process in the field, who understands how it works and who's involved in it, etc. And that's typically a business person. It always starts off with a business person. You then need a technology governor who actually controls the environment where you're going to deploy a um, a digital process, right? So essentially, what that technology governor is doing is they're making a safe area where the process expert can go into and work away and build out that process safely without impacting the rest of the business in a negative way. Okay, so that's where technology governance comes in. And the other thing then, of course, is it's really, really important to have the support of an executive sponsor. Again, from practicing this for many years now, we know just how important that is. You have to have the backing of an executive sponsor to make sure that everything goes smoothly, and also that ultimately the system is adopted by the workforce, because that's when you start seeing the benefits. Now, there's lots of other people on that graphic, and depending on your organization, you may or may not have them. So you may have, let's say, a GRC, Group Risk Compliance Officer, for example. You may not, right? So depending on the size of your organization, you may have more actors involved here.
I think if you have that tight governance framework in place, then what actually happens? If we look at some of our own customers where that is in place, what we see is process automation begin to flourish. So those process innovators that we predict are going to be needed in 2024, they have a place to work, a safe place to work where they can work within kind of controls that they're given, but at the same time, it enables them to innovate and automate across their organization. So with that in place, I think everybody actually benefits from it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so our third prediction is around continued pressure and desire for data transparency and process intelligence. So I think we don't really see any cooling off in that insatiable demand for data. And this data obviously is being used at the moment to inform decisions, deliver insights, and drive innovation. So they're all the more typical uses of it. But also, we do now have that AI requirement as well, because ultimately that's driven by having access to data and reasonable volumes of it, and also a reasonable quality of data. So I think we all probably understand some of the issues where the quality of that data isn't very good, and you're feeding it into some sort of AI capability, which is then using that data to make the wrong kind of decisions or provide the wrong answers. So yeah, we see the overall appetite for data continuing to grow. So if we look at that, then there was one interesting stat that Forrester had in a more recent survey, and what they asked organizations is, well, what do you actually see, or what solutions would you invest in to drive your excellence and transformation programs over the next 12 months? And 41% of the people said, well, actually, what we see is business intelligence and data analytics. So I think from our perspective, if we focus in a little bit on process automation, when we talk to organizations that haven't automated existing processes, what we find is they don't actually have the data at the moment. So they might actually have no data about how their operational processes work, or else they're only collecting a really small subset of data in a manual way. So that kind of doesn't really give them enough insight, and it also doesn't mean the data is overly reliable. So without that data, you're effectively missing a whole set of information that you can use to try and improve your operations in your organization. So I think that's something that we see missing. And I think then that's why people are looking for data, because without it, it really is a barrier to improve your operations, and it is a barrier to transforming. You can't necessarily understand what the effective transformation will be, and you can't also understand perhaps the priority you need to associate with particular areas of transformation. So I think they're kind of just some of our observations on what's happening in data. And if you're looking at a prediction around this, what I'd be saying is that the data sources that people use are going to continue to expand. I mean, we've seen that expand over the last few years in terms of volumes of data, but then getting data from other sources like Internet of Things, those kind of sensors that can feed into your overall data set. But what I think is interesting now is some of the some of the data that AI is enabling. So, for example, it's enabling a lot of speech to text. We all spend way more of our time on virtual meetings, and you can obviously listen to those. You can do things obviously like transcribe them. That doesn't really give you data; it just gives you a record. But what we see more of now is the ability to summarize those, extract key insights, and make recommendations based on the conversation that has just been picked up. So I think AI will add to the overall data set as well as consuming data. It's also going to add to the data set that we have within our organization. I don't know, Paul, if you have any views on that.
Yeah, I think a key thing you were saying there really is like combining sources of data. I think that's something that we often don't do. So,
Mm,
there might be analysis carried on in an organization on one particular set of data, but with process automation and with AI being applied to it, you can actually gather information on resource usage, the data that's collected on each of the tasks that is being executed, the data coming from other sources, like you're saying, conversations and so on, and combine all this information together to get new insights that you never would have had in the past. And that's through process automation, through accurate data capture, and ultimately through AI providing you a predictive analysis. This is really something that's going to happen in the future and not far in the future. So it's really interesting to see how the direction things are going here. And I do think that combining information from multiple data sources across your business is
mm,
going to be a new thing in the future. Because in the past, you had silos. You just had silos all the time when it came to data. And you might have, let's say, financial reporting, which reported on your company's finances according to your chart of accounts. But then, where do you combine that with actual resource usage and your operational data? It's not easily combined together. So people have tried to sort this out in the past using things like data lakes and whatever, but really, with the power of digital process automation, with the power of AI tools to analyze that and also align it with other information sources together, you really get the capacity to find out complete new insights, and ultimately that leads to better decisions that will maintain your competitive edge in the marketplace, etc.
Yeah, and I think we all know the challenge that the more data you have, the more you need to actually analyze it. And the problem is that lots of organizations don't necessarily have the skills to actually get into that, because it's not a once-off thing. It's really a continual thing, and it's really about people developing that capability. But I think some of the tools that are there can really help with that too. And I think we will see more of those kind of consolidated analytics platforms, which are actually easier to work with. And I think the second challenge there is that the more data analysis you have, the more people want. So that's that never ending cycle where people are constantly looking for
Yeah,
more and more insights, more and more information. I think if we go back to the whole sort of citizen developer theme there, it's really about making people business people within the organization more data savvy and giving them the tools and training so they can actually serve themselves. So, I
yeah,
think what we're going to see this year is more of those natural language type analytic solutions. So people can kind of query them using language they're familiar with and don't really need to learn
yeah.
specific skills. So I think that's something else we're going to see a bit more. But the
That,
usual word of warning applies there. If you ask it the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answers. You have to be careful there too.
yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely it's like I think in the past year we've seen an expectation of data. So people just um, they them expect your system to collect data and automatically present it to them. It's just an expectation, and the future is just like you described, Jared. Is the way you query that data and just ask a system to give you a stat, and it automatically just churns it out. Um, so it'd be interesting to see what can be done in what time frame in regards to that.
Mm,
But certainly, it's on the way.
yeah. No, I think it is, and I think then if we just to zoom in a little bit on some of the things we've been up to there, which tie into this is we understand that immediately once you start automating a process, you start collecting data about your operations, how people are working, the kind of things that are being done, and the sort of cycle times, etc., to do things. And as I said earlier, a lot of organizations miss this kind of layer of data. So when people start digging into it, there's quite a few revelations to them, and they really welcome having access to that information because it allows them then start making real-time changes to a business to try and improve things, whether it's a change to a process or just some organization, whatever they need to do. So I think then if you look at that, that's one layer of data, which is about your process and how your operations working. But then if you take kind of something else that you're picking up, particularly with process automation, which is business data. Once you start combining business data with process data, you start getting a whole load more insights. So, I mean, an example of that might be if you look at a process, you have a number of invoices that need to be paid. If you look at adding some business data to that, now you know the value of all of the invoices that you need to pay. That's a simple example of just taking process data by itself and adding a piece of business data. Another example might be, you know how long it takes a process to go from end to end. But with some business data, you might be able to analyze that a bit further and understand how long it takes a process from end to end for a particular customer segment. So bringing that business data and that process data together gives you a whole extra layer of value in understanding your business and being able to potentially design new services or offer new products to customers. So the what we've been up to then in that respect is with our analytics solution, we're very much focused on the non-technical users. So we have a capability where people using no code can self-serve in terms of building out dashboards and building out the kind of analysis that they want on the data. And I think what this is allowing people to do is build better insights on their business because every business is different and people are more interested in certain parts of data than others. And that's in turn allowing them to improve their overall operations. And the really interesting thing about it is, from our point of view, is that this is all real time data. So from the moment that you start to automate a process, you're now collecting data about
Mm.
how that process works and the business process as well.
Yeah, I think that's really significant, Jared. That ability to capture the progress of all the processes in your company in real time is massively beneficial. If you think about if you're stuck running on a process on emails and spreadsheets, for example, you never really
Yeah.
know where it is. But if you want to find out where it is, you have to go ringing around essentially to find out who's got the ball right now. If you have all that information to hand and you just at the click of a button you can see it on a dashboard, it just really makes your life a lot easier. And certainly that's a feedback from our customer base that when they get this like vast amount of information just there at their fingertips, it really makes a difference to their operations. Um, so yeah, having it like presented in a nice simple dashboard and so on really adds an incredible amount of value
Mm.
beyond that kind of the process improvements you'd expect from digital process automation, like improved
Yeah, I think it's a whole
communications, that kind
new
of
new
thing.
window into your organization, really.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so prediction four is the most successful automation projects are those that are focused on delivering measurable business outcomes. And we really see this in our customer base, and we see this as with the focus on resilience and business continuity and so on. We just see this as being ever more important going forward. Essentially, people will be happy for people to innovate, right? But at the end of the day, they want to see the benefits that come out of that. They want to see really tangible benefits and measurable business outcomes. It's really very significant, and we see this just increasing in 2024. Um, so basically, to do measurable business outcomes, you have to have a system of measurement. You have to have a way to measure those outcomes. And one way of doing that, of course, is through digital processes, because they're aligned with business goals by nature. You can measure the actual time and resources it took to achieve those business goals, and see through the data, the volume of benefit that those business goals are delivering. So really, we see that if you're going to deliver measurable business outcomes, you have to have a system of measurements. You have to have a way to actually record the achievement of those outcomes and what the outcomes were, etc., and how much effort was put in to actually delivering that outcome. And digital process automation is a way of doing that. So that's essentially what we see as the kind of the prediction. But let's talk a little bit more detail about how you can achieve that. Now, before we do that, we're just going to head into a poll. I think Ursula is going to take over and run this poll for us.
Yes, so before we jump into our fourth and final prediction, so we'd love to know from the audience, you know, Paul was saying there how, every organization, would love to see some results, but what are those results that you would like to see? So again, this is multiple choice, please select from the five options below. Would you like to create a culture of innovation? Maybe you've got some misalignment between your processes and IT, and that's something that's very important to you. Would you like to involve external stakeholders in your internal processes? So is that something that your organization has thought of, and maybe it's something that you would love to achieve within your business? Improving process visibility, so seeing where all your processes are across the business. And maybe just to have better reporting to support with decision making as well, and sharing insights maybe into other areas of the business too. So I think we have majority of people have voted. So let's end the poll there and share our results. So Paul, what are your thoughts? Improving process visibility has 70% of our votes there.
It's really interesting. It comes up again and again and
Hmm.
again. People never know where the ball is, and that wastes so much time and causes processes to fail and not achieve the business goal at the end of the process, right? So improving process visibility is a massive one. It's not surprising at all to me, and I think that's totally expected and something that you do get by nature when you introduce a digital process system.
Mm.
I noticed the second one there was reporting, which is closely
Yeah.
linked. So I'm sure Jared, you would agree with that one.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely. I was just thinking they are obviously very closely linked, and I think just like I spoke about there, this whole idea of collecting these extra insights, this extra data that you don't necessarily have at the moment, and then using that to inform decisions is really valuable, and it's something you get nearly as a byproduct of process automation. But it's something that once you get into looking at that data, you can find that it's kind of compulsive in terms of how you start obsessing about it and reviewing it all the time. But I also think that creating a culture of innovation, that's something that would be kind of close to our hearts as well. And it really is about, ties back to some of that governance thing. It's creating a safe space where you can actually do things, you can try out ideas, etc., and actually bring them to an organization. So who can then actually look to see, well, okay, can we actually use this innovation? So it's creating that culture where people are willing to step forward, to make suggestions and try things out. I think that's a really positive thing if you can engender that within an organization.
Great, thanks guys. And Paul, I'll let you continue on with your fourth prediction.
Yeah, so to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes achieved by our customers. So our customers, remember, are customers who have put in place digital process automation solutions. Okay, they've used their tool to actually digitize process. So one of the obvious outcomes is cost savings. So the system can measure how fast and how much time was spent doing processes and doing tasks and so on. And it's very easy to show what your cost savings were. And because you can put metrics into your processes that say, well, this is the estimated time they should take, this is the amount of time they took before automation, and then the system automatically tracks everything so you can see how you're progressing against those benchmarks. And you can very quickly see how your processes are running now compared to how they ran before automation, and therefore demonstrate the cost savings brought about by digitized processes. Now, there's broader things as well. So, for example, the interactions with your customers, the interactions with your suppliers, if they're included in your process, the digital process, they can be measured as well. So you can identify, where the bottlenecks in your processes are and reduce the bottlenecks, and again, show those through the metrics that are automatically captured by the system. So you can see um, the, how much savings the reduction in those bottlenecks has brought about. There's also a benefit through sustainability. So it's quite surprising, but a lot of our customers replace their paper-based processes with digital processes and then measure the actual reduction in usage of paper, for example, and also the transportation costs of paper between different parties in the process can be really significant. I remember one of our customers, a very large hospital, actually saved over 900,000 sheets of paper. They were able to measure this by digitizing all their processes. It was really significant, and that's a big sustainability um, savings cost just right there. But it's not just that; it's also the transportation of paper and so on, and having information available really easily electronically on an electronic device, regardless of where you are. Yeah, that's a really significant saving as well. Um, the next thing I get along there is compliance with regulations. So what we've noted, especially over 23 and 22 as well, is that there is an increased interest. There's more regulations coming into more and more industries, and there's an increased interest in using digital process to evidence to the regulator that you're actually compliant with the new regulations that are coming into play. So one of the things a digital process does is it tracks, it generates an audit trail of all the activity, and it standardizes the way people are carrying out their tasks and achieving their goals. This is really music to the ears of the regulators because they want to see evidence that actually, yes, you followed the defined process and you followed it in the right way, and that you recorded all the evidence that you needed to do, you made all the interactions with those external entities like customers and suppliers the way you should, etc., etc. And digital processes through the audit trail is able to evidence that to the regulators. They love digital processes. Continuous improvement is kind of self-explanatory. You always want to do things that you do better, and digital process solutions can actually show you how to do that. We talked about increased innovation because you can give people safe spaces to actually experiment and build their own solutions and try them out. Um, Data visibility, system tracks everything, and you can see where the ball is at any point in time. At the end of the day, through the collection of that data and the presentation of that data at the right time, to the right people, you make better decisions, and you can record that and evidence the outcomes of those decisions as well. So it's a really significant outcome for your business. And ultimately, a digital organization can adapt quickly because it's far easier to change a digital process than it is to change a manual process. So you can cope with change a lot more easily using a digital system.
Yeah, I think that continuous improvement one there is really important as well because processes tend to become outdated. There's changes in the business environment, changes in the organization, etc. So being able to continually improve and do that easily and quickly is really important.
Yeah, it's funny enough you mentioned this, Jared, because like I was at a client just yesterday, who was just singing the praises because they were in exactly the situation. They had a risk management system and they needed to be able to change it really easily, and they were able to do that with digital processes, and they were just so pleased they were able to do that. Something we come across again and again in our client base.
Hmm.
Um, so this example here is we thought that might be useful to actually talk about a case study, a real example of a company who implemented digital processes, and this is just one of our clients here down in New Zealand. They needed to, first of all, improve safety through the implementation of digital tools. So they had a broad brief, and they also wanted to involve um, lots of stakeholders in a digital process. So it wasn't just the people in head office carrying out procurement, for example. They wanted everybody in the company to be using digital processes, and that included people in remote sites who were not in an office-based role. So the solution that they put in place was FlowForma. They basically use a digital tool to connect the workforce together, regardless of where they were, regardless of what time it was, because they had people working 24/7, and they needed everybody to be connected together and participating in those digital processes, driving everybody forward to achieve those business goals. The outcomes that they had were like reduced service strikes. So they implemented a solution for permit to dig, where basically they dig an area of ground, but they have to ensure that there's no cables, for example, electrical cables running underneath that ground, um, and they were able to implement that very quickly and reduce service strikes, reduce the administration time, of course, because the system automatically would communicate between the different resources. Even that in itself is a significant time saving. They improved the quality of the documentation. That was largely down to the quality of the data coming in, because you're capturing data on electronic forms. It's all validated at the time it's captured, and then automatically included and generated in documentation, which significantly improved the output of documents. Um, we talked about access to all data anywhere, regardless of who was accessing it on what device and so on. And they significantly reduced the sign-off time. This is a real blocker. This is a construction company. It's a real blocker when you have to wait on somebody to simply sign off a process, sign off a document. And electronic systems can make that happen a lot faster. And at the end of the day, it helps people make their better decisions. So the management are more aware of what's going on across the organization, and they're able to see that, have visibility, and therefore make decisions faster. And that ultimately improves the management of the staff. So that's just a quick summary of the kind of outcomes that they achieved. These are the actual stats. So this was just after, I think, 6 months of operations, where they were just running this system on a couple of projects. But what they found was that it was widely adopted first off, and they actually executed over 20,000 processes. There were over 108 people involved in those processes, and they're able to measure the actual time saved to the digital solution. So in this instance, they saved over 2,000 hours saved on the execution of the processes. So it's really very significant, and it really helped gathering all these stats automatically. Really helped drive the adoption of the process solution forward. So it's now in place on over 9 projects within the organization. Um, so it's really useful to be able to gather these stats automatically, and to be able to surface them up to management to drive further momentum within the business for process optimization. Just looking at outcomes, these are some stats from a few of our clients. Again, going back to the fact that it's very easy to measure. We saw that people were on average saving 60% time improvement through a digital process. Um, we talked earlier on about the 900,000 sheets of paper saved, but also 5,000 administration hours saved by a college, which is equivalent to 2.5 full-time employees. And one company then automated over 200 processes within 1 year. This is going back to the innovation. It's very quick and easy to digitize the process in FlowForma. Um, so that was a key feature for them, key outcome from them. So if we move to the next slide, maybe. Oh, we're back to a poll question. Thanks, Ursula.
Great, thanks, Paul. Maybe in the interest of time, we just have a minute and 30 seconds left. We might just leave this poll out. Not Paul out, we won't leave you out, Paul, but we'll leave out this poll. But just moving on a little bit about FlowForma, and Paul, I know you've been chatting a lot there, so let me take this slide for you. So as you can see, FlowForma is an all-in-one tool. We've spoken about all of these areas from forms to workflow to analytics and document generation. So it is an intuitive tool that incorporates many different aspects that you can incorporate into your business. We do empower business users. So this is a message that, we pulled from one of our predictions. So this empowering the citizen developer and using that no code, logic only, outcome to drive digitalization in your business. FlowForma also sits on top of SharePoint and Office 365. And in the interest of time, we won't go into too much details. But of course, if you do have any interest in learning more about the tool, we'd be happy to share after the webinar. We have a short slide here that just shares some recommendations for success. So I definitely recommend our audience to take a screenshot of this and, pin it up on your bedroom wall if you want to. But these are just some of the areas that we've highlighted as, for the next 12 months, if you are really keen to digitize, eliminate your manual processes. So if they're on Excel, email, or paper based, you can remove them at speed. use a process first approach. So Paul, I know you talked about this briefly as well, and promoting that inward looking innovation. So your business users, they know their processes best. Allow business led approach to create faster adoption and digitize at speed, and also utilizing that opportunity to involve your external stakeholders into your internal processes as well. And last but not least, of course, we would recommend you take a trial of FlowForma as well. You can do that by visiting the FlowForma website. We were meant to have a Q&A, but the chat just got away with us, and we will have to answer your questions via email, if that is okay with everyone. So Paul and Jared, thank you so much for sharing your process automation predictions for 2024. Hopefully we'll see you before 2025, but we will definitely be back again this time next year to share our predictions. But really appreciate your insights and thoughts today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just before we go, for anyone that's interested, we do have some really nice resources in the resource panel, so you can find ebooks and white papers in there that will help you, take your next step in digitizing. And also we offer an amazing opportunity for our prospects so that you can actually see a demonstration of the tool. It's great us talking about the predictions, but some people need to see it to believe it. So would definitely recommend that you jump onto the website and request a demo from one of our solution experts. They'd be more than happy to help. But thank you again to our speakers and to our audience for joining us. I hope you found this webinar useful, and we will see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye now.